Okay, let's kick off our conversation where the following question, which I will pose to Deodat. What do you think is genocide? What does it entail?
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. Genocide is basically a term that was crafted since the early 40s, that came eventually in 1948. But it entails basically the following. There must be an intent, number one, to cause harm or cause extermination or annihilation of a specific identified group or tribe that has been pre-identified, and then there must be measures in place that must ensure that whatever plan of annihilation or extermination or harm that must be caused are executable. And finally, at the end of the day, such plan must be processed and that plan must be executed, meaning the actual event of killings, whether it's partly or wholly, must basically take place. Only then does it qualify for a genocide. But also keeping in mind that the definition was made in 1948, but that does not disqualify automatically that if it happened prior to 1948, it's not a genocide now. We have seen now with the Armenian genocide, where the German parliament has voted and accepted it in 1948. So similarly, genocide is not specifically related to that time. It's those 4 points that I've mentioned before that basically answers that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a really good answer you gave us. When you said it was a term that was coined around 1940, 1948, I would have been worried that because what we call genocide in Namibia happened before that time. So I'm gonna ask Alfons now what he thinks of the Namibian, episode. Does that count as genocide, you think?
Thank you very much, and you're all welcome. And just to answer, based on the definitions of my brother gave, the 1904, 1908 qualifies as genocide because there was an intent, there was harm, and then to a specific groups. So that entails that it's a genocide because it happened based, qualifying the definition that was given on the term genocide.
And again, what exactly led to the 1904, 1908 genocide episode?
So what led to the genocide, it was that, there was a colonization was taking place and there was a liberation, people were rebelling against the new ruler to have to take over. So there was outbreak war. Until they see maybe the Germans see from that side that they can get someone who can do a good deal, because the man who came was not in Namibia but was called in to come and declare genocide, which is von Trotha. And so the whole scene was not there, but according to what we've been reading, so is that war that was going on between the two nations, or the three nations that were involved.
Just a quick question to our technical team. Is this microphone working? Can we use it off? Okay, I'll put the microphone to Erica. So, okay, Erica, we've just heard from Alfons what he thinks happened during the 1904-1908 genocide. Would you mind adding a little bit more to that, on what had happened exactly, how it came about, what happened, and how did it all go about, how did it end?
Thank you, Milani, for the question. Also, thank you for inviting me and us to this panel, to be able to talk with each other and discuss things. I'm not a historian, therefore I cannot give you a historically correct or exact, acceptable view or story of what exactly happened during the genocide. And I think there are also very different views on how the genocide developed. There are some historians who see it as something which developed very slowly. It began with a simple war, or not a simple war, it began with a declaration of war by the Herero people, then the reaction by the German military, and then to some frustrations on the German side, and so it evolved finally into calling this General von Trotha in the extermination order, which then ended in genocide. So some people say there wasn't a conscious decision from the beginning to destroy the Herero people or exterminate them, but it developed through time. And others said, no, it was from the beginning the aim of the German military and of the German Reich at that time to destroy the Herero and later the Nama people. And as I'm not a historian, I cannot say which interpretation is correct, probably something in between. But I think today, years, to still deny and argue about whether it was a genocide or not is very futile. We have the definition as Lothar said, the UN Convention defined genocide in such a way that yes, it is a genocide. And Namibia has accepted the term, Germany has accepted the term. So I don't think we have to argue about the term any longer. It's accepted, and we shouldn't go back to, in this, or actually most discussions, to start arguing whether it was in fact a genocide. We can, maybe generations later can do that, but not at this point.
Thank you, that was a good answer. Deodat, did you want to add a little bit to that maybe?
Thanks very much. I would love to add on that. It is correct that there are different views potentially on the genocide. So just touch on the Nama Traditional Leaders Association's view, how we see it, and obviously if there are challenges, there can be challenges, but for us, it was not a once-off thing that just happened, the genocide itself, because it started with the idea of getting a settler land for the Germans. That's how they came in. And for us, the very first genocide actually happened on the 12th of April, 1893, when Lothar von Trotha gave an instruction in the early hours of 12th April for the destruction or the extermination of the Witbooi nation or the Witbooi clan, the tribe of the Ancestral and the Witbooi tribe. That for us was the very first genocide, because the instruction was given and the intent, in fact, Lothar von Trotha sent his brother before time to do the planning on how the attack would take place. And it was done in the early hours of the morning while the people were still just getting up. And then the attack happened and the instruction was given that we must destroy the tribe of the Witbois. So that for us was the beginning and the very first part of the genocide. That was actually caused by the fact that Witbooi was refusing to sign a protection treaty. His position was, if I sign a protection treaty with you, then it means you become my boss. I'm not the owner of my land anymore, of my people. The moment you must protect me, I fall under you. And that followed that after 1893, the next was the people of Gobabas. We had a Nama tribe called the Kai Tawan of Admiral Lambert, who was also killed, replaced by the Germans with his brother Edward Lambert. And later, together with Overmandel, they went again into war with the Germans. But that part was how we as Nama see it is in time of peace. This has happened. There was not a war declared between the Thomas tribe, the Berber tribe, and the Germans, because there was an agreement signed for peace in November 1892 amongst the people of Herero and Nama. And because of that, Berber knew he is no war with anybody whatsoever. And that was the first part. The second part of declaring the extermination orders, the 2nd of October 1904, that extermination order was withdrawn on the 8th of December 1904 after Germany looked at the 4 points, which was like it's outside the Christian value or human value. Then they looked at how do you build an economy afterwards, with what labor. Then they looked at it's totally not possible to exterminate an entire tribe. And then they looked at the 4th point was what will be Germany's standing in a civilized world. And because of that, they withdrew it on the 8th of December. But that was just on paper, the killings continued. In the case of the Namas, the extermination order expired only in April 1905, after Germany has already given reasons of withdrawing the extermination order. They have issued a new extermination order in 1905, which has up to today not been withdrawn. Again, it was not in the middle of the war. The war continued up until the point where they started negotiating for peace. And it's after the peace deals were started making that actually the arrests started and the killing started. Obviously, there were incidents that you can read in the blue book where you find at one spot 50 women and 36 children were killed, etc. But how the Namas conducted their war against how the Germans conducted the war, that was another point which is very problematic or that was not good for us. Because the Namas through Gau Odenrans and Samuel Isaac were gathering all the women and children, moving them to missionary stations. And from there, they can go ship back to Germany, etc. But on the other hand, Germany was killing women and children that are not part of the war. And those were the things that were not good for us from the Nama side. So it's not in the middle of the war that these things happen as far as we are concerned. You make a peace treaty, you are not in fighting with anybody, but then that other party comes and kills. And that's the problem for us. And we see that as genocide. We don't see it as a war and this thing happened in the war. No. You started making peace, and it's only after you make the peace that the killings actually rapidly increased. I think.
Thank you, Dara, for that elaborate answer. Let me just quickly remind you, please, whatever comments you have on your mind and questions, don't forget to write them down. When we take a break, we'll definitely go around and collect everything and discuss it with the presenters today. There is, different views on who the affected communities were. It is believed that it was the Nama community, the Herero community, and the San community, as well as the Damara community. Obviously, people have different views on that, but I think for the sake of, not excluding people, this is a sensitive issue. We don't want to exclude anybody from this conversation. So let's, when we refer to the affected communities, I think we mean the Namas, the Hereros, the Damara Namas, the Damara and the San community as well. Okay, so my question was, the topic for discussion is how the genocide, now that we have, concluded, now we understand what genocide is all about and when it took place and how it happened. We want to go further into the conversation and just find out how the genocide really affected, those communities. Alphonse, how were the living conditions of the affected communities before the genocide?
Thank you very much. That's a good question. So I was thinking, when you look at the Herero way of living, they're more nomads, people, or pastoralists, as you say. And before the genocide, these people were living that lifestyle of nomads, and we have our own chief on different regions or the area where they've been situated, that were led by different households as chiefs in those areas. So it was the nations that have its own leadership, its own way of doing things. It has its own way of educational system, what we call it the indigenous knowledge, way of educating their generations. So it was a nation that was already moved, that had its own economy, and it has its own institutions where they do their stuff, because commemorations, weddings, and all those things will be happening before the genocide, and the way how they did themselves when it comes to grazing and all those stuff. So that's how it was before the genocide.
Erica, you wrote this beautiful book that I, since day one I read it. I haven't finished reading it, but I really love this book because it's storytelling. You don't need a college certificate to understand what is written in here. You have traveled miles and miles when you were busy writing this book. Have you ever come across anyone who have been describing to you how the living conditions were of the affected communities before the genocide?
No, well, it came up all the time, but it wasn't a specific topic because it was more the land situation today and the emotions around land today, and of course, the emotions, especially of the Black Namibians, and especially then of the Herero and Nama people, are all determined and characterized by what happened in the past. And the stories that I heard really touched me and gave me an impression of the deep, deep sadness and feelings of loss about the land more than 100 years ago. And that there's still, I was more in the Herero area, but not so much in the Nama area, but I lived there for a long time. It was the sense of loss of that land was so deep, and it was very, very hurtful for most people of the Nama and Herero community that the land reform in Namibia, which started in 1991, did not take these deep feelings of loss, and not only feelings, but real, actual loss of land into account when resettling people in terms of the resettlement policies and the different instruments of land reform. We all know that at the first land reform conference of 1991, which was attended by more than 500 people from all over the country, it was decided after long debate not to take ancestral land claims into account when the Namibian government would start a resettlement program, which meant that land from white hands would, through different instruments, go back into the hands of black farmers, or not even black farmers, or like people, using now these words black and white, because then we all know what I mean. So yes, this deep sense of loss and the strong emotions around the loss of ancestral land. Yes, I heard about them, and I knew about it before, but hearing them from people, especially those who live in the communal areas next to the white farms who used to be part of their land, living at the edge of these farms in poverty. I think we have to, as white people who maybe also have relations or friends who are having these farms, we must try to get into the shoes of the people to really understand these emotions. And I think we have underestimated them for a long time. And now after the agreement between Germany and Namibia, I think they came out so strongly, and we should have known. I mean, there was no excuse not to have known it, but it really now came to the fore.
Yeah, I just want to add one of the key things when it comes to the Herero, even before, even now, one of the things when it comes to land is not about only about economical, but spirituality. And before that, we have, if you go across the whole Namibian nations, you find most of the towns or areas are named. It has Herero names, it has traces that you trace the area in your own vernacular that speak about the spirituality, the connection that we have with that land. Now, if I was in a Abhaya, but now today I'm in Otuo, and I lost that spirituality, the connections in that area. There are certain areas when it comes to Herero cultures, like in my area, like where we don't say certain things, you don't eat certain things, you don't do certain things, because the area is spiritually, that spirituality connections between the people, and that's why they're living there, because they've been moved out.
Because spirituality is an important thing for the Herero people, isn't it?
It's one of the key when it comes to our prayer, we go through our ancestors. And ancestors are the people who have been laying in the land. Because when you talk about spirituality, let's come to a place like Okahana. It's one of the spiritual centers of the Hereros, because they are laying there is the graves of our ancestors that are there. And when you are praying, you don't pray to God directly, you speak to those people in the land. And even if you move from one place to another place, before you do anything, you have to speak to the people in that land, the owner, the ancestor of the land, to welcome you and even to give you a peaceful stay. That's now if you've been moved out, especially people who have been in the diasporas, who have been lost out of these things. So that's where the question, the problem is the loss of spirituality and also the self of identity. Because if you are connected to that, it also gives you some identity about yourself.
Yeah, with this, I just have one question to you. You are a young man, and you are still very deeply rooted in your culture, and you love your culture, and you maintain it, and you celebrate it, as we can see also from your attire. But during my interviews, I also noticed that what you said just now is not so much supported anymore by the younger generation, especially those who are living in the cities. They have their family who live on the farm or in the communal land. They visit them and they have celebrate Christmas there. But basically, they have most of them have partly lost this connection with their culture, or if they didn't lose it, they are not so much interested. They are interested in a life in the city. They are interested in a plot in the city and not a piece of land on the ancestral land. So maybe you can elaborate on that, because you are one of the younger generation. But that was quite obvious that there is a difference between older and younger people. The younger people said, yes, we know all about the history from our parents. We can also see the pain in their eyes when they talk about it, and some even don't talk about it because it's such a hurtful issue, but they themselves have a different view of the future.
Okay, Daudat. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Erica. So, one of the things that happened during all this war that lost is culture and traditions. It has been lost, and some of them, especially when you look at the central area. I'm from Kunene. I've been raised traditionally. I started my school when I was 10 years old, and every weekend or holiday when I go back, I'm going to our normal lifestyle. And I've been raised in a very traditional home, so I know all the spirituality around land and everything they had to do with culture. So one of the key issues that push young people away is the loss of that culture. The more you stay here in town, you lost the touch with the ground. And if you go there, there's a certain knowledge that we've been passed through the what we call the indigenous knowledge way of thinking. We don't have to sit in a class to know what type of plant if you are in a field. If you are thirsty that you had to drink, but you had to go through the process when you are going to look after the goat with your elder brother or your father, or the story that have been shared around the fire. So those that the embodiment of knowledge that we had to grow up with. That's what maybe a privilege that we have experienced that, and I also came to the academic world. And the good thing in my masters, I'm also doing research in indigenous knowledge, how to use technology to preserve culture. So maybe that's what leading me back to my culture. That's where I'm more a big difference. Most of my peers doesn't even understand how can I become a computer scientist and still where is the thing. Yeah, so but for me, it's totally different. I begin to see things between the two worlds. And I wrote an article maybe 2019. I said between modernity and traditions. So I've been living between the two worlds, the academic world through the Western education, and also the traditional life through being taught in the informal indigenous knowledge systems.
I'll get back to you just now. Deodat, I haven't heard from you what you think was like before and after the genocide. What is it that was good? Was it good? Was it bad? What is it you think people have lost? How were their lives after the genocide in comparison to before the genocide?
Thanks for the question. Before the genocide, before the land expropriations. Remember, land expropriation also took its time because there were different measures first to take away land. You had the credit ordinance, you had initial decrees, and I think most people see the final decree of land expropriation is considered as the 1905, 26 December 1905 Imperial Decree, which specifically said that no Nama and no Herero should have land or property, movable or immovable. That's the Imperial Decree of 1905. But it was a process that ran prior to that, where land was already taken away. And there were losses already incurred prior to that. But that was the final expropriation that actually took away all the land, all the properties movable and immovable, which was actually implemented only in March 1907 for the southern part of Namibia, for Great Nama Land. There are only 2 Nama tribes that were combined with the Hereros in the December 1905 one expropriation order. But because the war was still busy or engaged in the South, only in March 1907 was that imperial decree extended to the South. And because of the Swarapoi tribe in Kunene and the Erongo tribe of the Tokna Nama tribe that goes across Erongo and Kunene. Those ones were initially taken and the other ones started only in March 1907. Prior to these expropriation orders and the loss of land, Great Nama land which was the land of the Nama people, stretched from Gobabis up to the Orange River, from Erongo up to the Orange River. That was the Great Namakwa land, and small Namakwa land started from the Orange River to Cape Town, which we called in Nama Krikai. Now, prior to the expropriation, you had the Nama leaders met and signed a treaty. It's called the Wahanas Treaty on the 9th of January 1858. Because you had 13 Nama tribes in total, but 8 were already based in Great Namakwa land over the years, and 5 has crossed from South Africa to Namibia. Those 5 tribes have experienced the loss of land through the Dutch or the Dutch and the British. So they highlighted to the existing tribes in Great Namakwa land about these losses that can incur or that can occur going forward. Because of that, they met and signed a treaty on the 9th of January 1858, which stipulated how the land and its resources and the people will be managed in Great Namakwa land. Obviously, the Herero Royal House was invited to this treaty, as well as the Griqua Royal House, because those were the 2 royal houses Namas were dealing with at that point in time. So they were invited and they drafted the Wahanas Treaty. It was like the governance of Great Namakwa land. That was for the entire Great Namakwa land, but each leader with his tribe or clan had their own land. For example, I am a Karumwa from a Kidmanswilber. Our borders were defined in 1890 with the protection treaty. But obviously we knew it, but when the protection treaties were signed, I know my land is from the Lion River up to the Assap River. South is Lion River, north is Assap River. In the west I've got the Fish River, and in the east I've got the Guruhat River. Normally we use rivers and mountains to indicate our borders. But no Nama leader was allowed to sell land or resources on his own. He had to consult because it was like a federal state, this Wahanas Treaty. So although you may have diamonds or whatever minerals on your own copper, but you couldn't do business on your own and sell land. That was the structure prior to the genocide and the land expropriations. And everything was done in the interest of the entire tribe. So even if I move from the Kidmans tribe to the Wahanas tribe of Cape Town, as a Namakwa person, I was allowed to go live there, but I must abide to their customs. But they cannot reject me because as a Namakwa person, I am also a landowner of Great Namakwa land. That was the process that existed. But after the expropriation with land, we have got the missionaries who were very much involved in prior to the taking over of the governments. Missionaries would come, start with the missions, the church part, and they basically acted like spies. They would know what are the strong water points, they would know what the borders are, they would know if this tribe is attacked, how the defense mechanism is of that tribe. They were relaying that information to the military and to the government of the Germans. And so that way they had their role. But even in the middle, after the war, when the negotiations started for peace, and they were part and parcel of the process of establishing reserves, native reserves. These native reserves that we call today communal land, because all the land rights were taken away, the natives did not have land rights, so they had to be placed in native reserves. Those native reserves had very specific characteristics. Whoever is living in a native reserve will not own land. Whatever house he builds there will not have value. And because there are no owners, if people lose jobs, if they become unproductive through injuries or whatever reason, they can be pushed into a reserve. If they leave commercial farms, they can be pushed and dropped off in a reserve. And nobody in a reserve can make a living. And because of this, people lost their dignity. Because they knew no matter how much I can do on my own, I'll never be able to make a living. This was recognized already in Germany, in their parliament. And they had a debate in the parliament in Germany where they said, does that mean these natives will never ever have a life on their own? And I think they've taken a resolution in I think it was in December 1906, but that resolution of the Parliament of Germany was never actually implemented, where a certain portion of land and animals should have been returned to the people. But with the native reserves, you can't really make the characteristics of a native reserve as such that you can never ever make a proper living or a dignified life. There were areas when your animals, livestock increases, you must be moved out of the reserve or you must be punished. So you will have a certain number. My parents-in-law, they had to move out of the Aman or the Britannia Reserve into the Beersheba Reserve because Beersheba did not lose that much in terms of rights. So they were allowed to farm with more than 100 goat and more than 100 sheep. But in the other reserves, you're not allowed to farm with more than that. And because of those reasons, people lost their lives and dignity. And whoever is in the native reserve economy of the new rulers. That's more or less how things started. And we must understand, many people are asking the question of why is this coming up only now? This is coming up only now because up to 1915, you had the German rule, which was taken over by another white rule, the apartheid government. Then at independence, or prior to independence, we had many, or the elders had many engagements about the genocide and the land lost. And after independence, there was this expectation these issues will be addressed. But the 91 land conference achieved zero. And the latest land conference, we also knew, would achieve nothing. Because there is no political will. There is no political will to bring about change. We are doing only window dressing and stuff, but we are not committed to address these issues. Obviously, there are cultural losses, there are spiritual losses. I know the Wairo people like to be buried next to their ancestors, so they must not ask permission to be buried there, etc. But on the Nama side, I know that normally they ask for sand, even if it's one bag of sand of their place, that they must be given, and once their coffin is placed underground, the coffin must be covered with the ancestral land first, before the rest of land, wherever he is, must take. Those are part of the culture. There are so many things that are lost through that process. But the most, or the biggest one is obviously economic, politically, and also the dignity, because you have suffered generationally from one generation to the next generation. This process went on and on, and that is one of the biggest, because people don't even understand if you want to buy a commercial farm or what is it that you are doing. Those are the type of questions. So I think the impact was mostly on the poverty that went from one generation to the other. It's the dignity that was lost as well. Thank you.
Thank you, very elaborate. if I can turn to you, Alphonse, why is it such a bad thing for one to lose, cultural identity and traditions? Why is it such a bad thing? I mean, we just try to understand exactly how losing, cultural identity and traditional way of doing things, losing a tradition. How does it impact a human? Why is it a bad thing?
Thank you very much. It's a good question. It's the same that says that if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. So you have to be rooted in where you come from for you to pave the way for where you're supposed to go. So to lose your culture, because culture is what defines who you are. So if you lose that, then you lose your identity. Then you have what we call identity crisis. And one of the key, if you come to the genocide, the aftermath of genocide, they said after 100 generations, they define one of the issues that you find in the generation that suffer from genocide is identity crisis. And you can see all over across those generations that suffer from genocide, they have such issues. Because the issue of trust also, if you don't know who you are, you don't even trust somebody else. So that's why the culture is more important, because it defines who you are.
Erica, if I may ask the same question, I mean, you were asking Alphonse a little earlier today that you've noticed the newer generation not being interested in their culture and traditions. Why do you think it's such a bad thing? How does it make you a German person, or how does it make you, what kind of a person do you become if you don't have any identity? It seems like it's a concern for you that people, the younger generation isn't really interested. Just asking so we find out really how people were impacted.
Yes, thank you. Yes, difficult question. One could talk about it a long time. I think that young people are not so much attached to their culture anymore, has not only with social media and digitalization, and young people love to look forward, and they have so many more opportunities today than in older times, where they were very closely connected to their community and therefore to the culture, while today they have opportunities to learn other languages, even to see other countries if they are lucky, and they want to be part of the modern, technological, hip community, young community. So I don't think we should see it too negatively. At the same time, culture, your own culture, this means your language and your cultural traditions, are also important to feed your soul, because your soul is fed by your culture. And if young people don't have that anymore, they become a bit like loose ends, they're not rooted. So I think it's both. Let them go, let them have a modern life, but also keep them as in a modern young way, also as part of the culture. I don't know if that answers your question, because this is a contemporary question and it's not really so much to do with the ancestral land question and so on, but I think we shouldn't connect everything with that history. It's a common international development with young people.
When you're talking about identity crisis, that seems to be a really big issue. Isn't obviously the world has changed, things can never be the same again. But what the problem is, what we actually find is an issue is that is this new lifestyle, is it something good for us? Would obviously the whole genocide thing comes with the Europeans colonizing Africa. Do we wish that they had never come to Africa so that we could live our ways, in our own ways, which do we feel would have been better for us, or how do you feel about that?
Thanks very much. I think what Alphonse touched on the identity crisis, I think Ms. Erika put it in a very nice way. That you cannot lose your culture completely. You have to have it. And just to touch on the identity crisis in the youth, etc. In the case of the Nama people, there is not a single Nama person at this point in time that has got an identity card, whether it's in Namibia or elsewhere, that has got his real name on it. We've got only European names, we've got only Christian names. 100% yes. There is not a single Nama person worldwide that has got his own real name on it. My son's real name is, let's say, Tabakman Ono. That name is never on the ID. Late David Friedrich was Takma Gube. You've got Odamanzet, you've got whoever. We are currently using those real names only at weddings, only at funerals. But these are our real names. Because if I go to marry a girl and I come up with the name Theodor Dirks, I'm lost. Nobody will marry me. I have to say, who am I? Where do I come from? Because how those names work is, I am Tabaham. Now my son is Tabahman, meaning I'm the son of Tabaham, but I'm not Tabaham himself. And then he takes up his mother's name as his real name, Ono. Now Ono, we give a name, Ono means nameless. It's when there is his mother or someone is coming from a white person, a German or British or wherever you get the Morris brothers, you get whoever. There is an honor. But without these names, you won't be able to really get a wife or at your funerals and stuff. Those things will come out. Our understanding and the new people that came in is understanding. Because immediately, even if it's a white man's child, a Nama woman would give that white man's child a white man's name. And the whites didn't like that. So they decided, no longer will you use this method of giving names. He will get now your surname, the Christian surname, or the European surname, etc. So that's the one part of it. And when you talk about Nama names, no matter where you are, if Gaup Isak says he's a Nanupe, and my mother was a Nanupe, then we immediately know they come from the Isak's royal house. And that's the link. And that has affected our kinship to explain to the younger generation how you are related to which house. And that is part of the things, cultural identity and our real names that we've completely lost. Then you had all the exterminations. During the genocide, you had cases where many of the people who are today, let's say, Aiku, the surname is Aiku, of Aikus, they are actually boys in Friedrich. But during the war, Beersheba did not at a certain point go directly into war with the Germans. So if you have a surname of someone living in the Beersheba area, your chances of surviving was good. So you had to change your name so that you are not a Boyce or a Friedrich. Then you had also people like Steelman, Redboy, and Cornelis Friedrich listed on the extermination order. So for those families that are, let's say, Steelman, they would change the name in order to survive, because you can be confused with the Steelman that is listed to be killed. And those were the things that also changed. That's only on the names part that we definitely think that part must be corrected. People must have their real names so that they can build the kinship. When you have your family tree, where you come from, it's important to know who you are and where you come from. That's on the names. Then we've got our language, which is today called Kwaekwaekobab. Kwaekwaekobab, still in Namibia, although it's the very first language that was spoken with the Khoisan, we come from the Khoisan Khoikhoi Nama. And that language has been here thousands of years before the birth of Jesus Christ. But that language in today's education system is still a secondary language in our school curriculum. So even if you get the best marks or symbols, you can only get 7 points. And those things are very wrong for us. It needs to change. But it has got the history back in that. Thank you.
Okay, just one last question on this. Obviously, the genocide has, caused the affected communities to be displaced. How do you think has the displacement affected them? People were scattered all over the place, all over, some in Botswana, some in South Africa. There was so much displacement that was caused by the genocide. How has that affected the communities that were targeted?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very good question, but tough one. Yeah, the disposition that comes to the issue of land. People just lost their land, their identity, their economy. That's why most of the people you find they are economically on the low. So that's one of the issues. Some of them lost, as my brother said, they lost their name, their culture, even their practice of traditions. In some area, you find heroes that are living in South Africa today. They call themselves heroes, but they cannot have any practice that they can do. That's related to a hero. But they have just the name, and they cannot even speak the language. That's one of the laws that these people have. And as you say, people have been moving from, some people even moved completely, they are lost, even they cannot trace back where they came from in some area, in this area. So that's one of the big costs that the disposition of land have cost to the nations that we have now.
I would like to answer, to react to this actually with a question with an observation. And also you always talk about that you have lost your culture. From an outsider's point of view, I've lived among the Nama people for 24 years. I have did a lot of research, not historical, not economic research with the Herero people. And yes, it's all true what you said, but at the same time, it was for me amazing, and also, yes, I was curious about how proud the Herero people still were of their culture, how much culture they still left. They had they told me so many stories of how boys grow up and girls grow up and what kind of dresses and ornaments they wear, and about all the traditions with cattle. Yes, they lost most of the cattle, but they still have some cattle, and they still have these cultural rituals at funerals and so on. And also the Nama people, they were actually very proud of their culture, especially their songs and their dances and their stories and their jokes. So I don't think they completely lost their culture. And also their names, they all had Nama names. Maybe they are not officially on their passport, but they always use their Nama names among themselves. And also if they knew me better, they also gave me a Nama name and my children and so on. So yes, they lost their culture. They lost this cohesion of owning a common land. I don't want to negate that. I just want to speak also for their strengths, that they still have so much of their culture, which I really admire. That's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you so much. We're having a really good conversation. I think it's time for us to take a short break.
And I thought we would really engage the issue of ancestral land, because land dispossession did take place. And I thought we would also engage very critically and openly the issue of genocide. But maybe it would come through this. I would want to to start my intervention with something that I got through research and reading through the history, and this is contained in the history books and archives filed by the UN on Namibia's history, and just give the context. And this is said by the head of the Settlement Commission at the start of the colonial project, way back in the 1800s, the German colonial project. And the head of the Settlement Commission apparently wrote, and I read it, the decision to colonize in Southwest Africa means nothing else than that the native tribes must withdraw from the land on which they have pastured their cattle, and to let the white man pasture his cattle on those self-same lands. If the moral right of this standpoint is questioned, the answer is that for people of the cultural standard of the Southwest African natives, the loss of their pre-national barbarism and the development of a class of workers in the service of and dependent on the white man is primarily a law of existence in the highest degree. That is our reality. The reality is that colonialism, whether we like it or not, had racist undertones. They saw the land inhabited by our people. They came and they formulated under international law the notion of res nullius. They saw this land, this stupid people don't know what to do with the land. For me, as a land activist, I totally agree that for one or the other reason, the government of the Republic of Namibia in 1991 took that decision that ancestral land is way too complex an issue to address, so we would rather not address it. But we do have generations, and this is my words to the white compatriots, we do have a generation that gained from generational privilege. And on the other hand, we have a black people that suffers from generational poverty. There were laws that were passed to make these people, and my question then is, how best to address that? Are we having a generation of white Namibians that recognize, as I hear you say, that we cannot have a situation where you've got a group of people that are clinging to the privilege that they got unduly so, and you've got the majority, on the other hand, that is beginning to say, we will not forever tolerate this. And this is the question, in terms of land dispossession, that I wanted this panel to discuss. Lastly, our parliament is currently seized with the question of the so-called reconciliation agreement. Is that really right? And I've heard on Facebook that there are some of the compatriots, and again white compatriots, that are saying it is 85 or 81? 81 billion or not. Why do you cry? It is not your money. It matters. It matters because the people that have suffered, the Hereros and the Namas, they are not owed And I want to say this, they are not owed development aid. They are owed reparations. They are owed reparations. And I'm going to Germany. And that's my last question to you. From the 16th till the 28th, I've been asked by one of the NGOs to come and talk about this reconciliation agreement. To the representatives, we know and we read in the history books that the San community were hunted down like animals. The reconciliation agreement doesn't mention the San community. I also don't hear from officially from the Hereros and from the Nama communities the atrocities, even though they were not mentioned in the extermination orders, but the San communities were also affected, probably even before. I don't know, I'm not a historian. And lastly, to the German compatriots. Why is it that I get a sense that Germans, or some of them, in Germany, is much more supportive of the issue of historical injustice being addressed than Namibian-born Germans? Why is it that we have, or is my impression correct? Or am I confused in terms of that understanding? Thank you so much. I know we got a little bit long.
My name is Lothar von Trotha. I am working as an activist, but also I'm a queen. So I just wanted to find out, because there is this sensitivity that we are worried about all the time. And I think it may be something that we need to look at. Is it about ourselves, how we hold this issue, and how we segmentize it and make it is only for these people and these people, and maybe how we have fallen into that trap. Thank you, John, for highlighting the very beginning of Southwest Africa, because I think it is before the 1904s, the 1906, that the issue of taking away land of our people and put them into servitude has started. And I think it's very important to break ourselves away from this exclusion that we have become party to, that we cannot dislocate ourselves to acknowledge, really acknowledge all of us. The topic of reconciliation is on the tables now. I really don't know how the government will talk and how we will respond to it. Especially when we would not recognize the San and the Gukwen and only continue to, I don't know how we are going to tackle that topic. I'm very curious how we, not the government, how we as the citizens will address that. Because I think it has become time to change the tune. So that's my comment. So therefore, the forebearers that has started the discussion of the genocide, when are we to move towards each other? When the panelists were sharing about the loss, the dignity, the culture, I was sitting here and saying, my goodness, if you look at the San, how they have lost. If you look at the Nukwe, how they have lost. How can we start to ease this sensitivity that we have built amongst ourselves and bring ourselves to par? Because, for example, the genocide is not only the von Trotha genocide, the genocide had happened the moment these people had put their feet on this land. Already then the genocide happened. And if we don't acknowledge that, we become piecemeal of our own problem. So also the sensitivity, especially I think, and I'm so happy to see our German compatriots. I had also the question, why are we not coming together as the people who have become the generational beneficiaries? Because I think the sensitivity also, my question is, the sensitivity also, is it not caused because we see and feel and meet the generational beneficiaries and they don't do anything? If maybe that also not something, so if we break that and start to walk towards each other, maybe this might become less sensitive and less hostile, because Riani was saying we may attack each other. I don't think we are at that level yet. We will never attack each other. I'm sitting here, I want to hear what my fellow German compatriots are saying. I want to hear what my fellow Herero speaking compatriots are saying, what the Namas are saying. I want to argue out and I want to come to a conclusion where I'm standing here as an affected community member. So my question here for everybody in this house is that I believe there has been numerous research done, papers written on the Namibian genocide. I think that it might be fragmented here and there. I believe I also saw a paper somewhere that a Harvard University student had written some piece on the certain type of group that has been exterminated or something like that. So I believe we have a lot of information that we can look back and work on in terms of affected communities. But now, and I believe there are also resolutions that can be taken on that wealth of information that is around in the developed world. So my question here is, I still have the same sentiment that is arised by the previous speakers in terms of what is Germany and the German, and some of us are even some descendants from this Germans. The question here is to what is, if the Germans are pardoning and apologizing for what has happened, what are they planning based on the information that is on the end? That is my question, and I'm putting it so forward, but I'm having some feeling in the emotions in it. But I'm saying, if there's really a pattern, if there's really a feeling of apology or something like that, what are the way forward? Because at some point, someone was saying, if the Germans are not working with the affected communities, then it means they are still having that extermination order in the back of their minds. That is what someone or even an old person was saying. They were still hoping for those ones that they want for extermination to be exterminated and get rid of it. So that is just something that I can put forward. It might sound offensive, but we want to hear a feeling of apology, a feeling of restoration, a feeling of reparation. Because if you look at the Namas still, for instance, in the south, what do you think about the Namas? They are deep down in the towns. That is just emotional expression, but I want to feel some nerve here. Thank you. Is your question?
Last one. I'm a German-speaking Namibian, or a Namibian of German heritage, and I'm a professional historian. I'm speaking completely off the cuff. I had actually decided to not say a word. You just got me to say some things. There is an awful lot of research on the genocide.
is more research on our Herero stuff than there is on Nama stuff. There's very little on Nama stuff and there's very little on San stuff. But there is a lot of stuff that one can think of. The stuff that is available generally basically falls into two categories. There's the local way of, there's a local German way of doing history, which is the nihilist in completely across the board. It's unprofessional and it's not done by professional historians. And another body of historiographical work that is mainly based in Germany, that comes from professional historians, but that doesn't come from Namibian professional historians, and for that reason, its outlook is slightly different from what Namibians are interested in, and it's completely different from what Namibian Germans would like to know about the story. So here I'm talking, and you can see I'm getting excited, I'm very emotional about this. Namibian Germans need to finally look at this history and take it in. It's complicated. History is very complicated. It's not one thing that you can say once off and everybody has understood what this is all about. But I'm also addressing my Black Namibian compatriots. Please also look at this stuff that comes out of academia, because it would make your argument so much stronger and so much more nuanced and so much more differentiated. I have nothing more to say.
Thank you so much. I'm going back to the table.
Thank you. I actually like the fact that Nakuto and the audience, Rosa and everyone else was opportunity. When Nakuto started, the issue of the joint declaration and the exclusion of reparations. I think the joint declaration as it stands now, NTLA or the Nama Traditional Leaders Association and OTA were not involved at all. So our approach to reparations are completely different from what the government negotiated the development aid. We are more focused on reparation. In fact, a comprehensive reparation package that is based on the principle or restitution before compensation, where you can look first at what should be restored or what should be repaired. That includes human remains that are currently in the institutions in Germany. And then we understand the two governments are saying that those human remains belong now to private institutions, like the universities, the museums, etc. We don't buy that. If we are allowed to come to the negotiating table, we will definitely highlight those things must be brought back, including artifacts, etc. And you need a legal framework for that. John was very right when he said the first land conference did not address, and then the ancestral land issues were not addressed at all. That is 100% correct. And the latest second land conference did not also really, with political will, address that issue. The current government is completely scared to deal with these issues. We call it sensitive, like Rosa was questioning what is this sensitivity. It's not sensitivity, it's just the fear of not facing what you are supposed to face. That's what it is. If you face and you know what the problem is, then you will find solutions to it. But it's because you are not actually addressing it. The issue on reparations, as I explained already, currently development aid, we completely reject that, obviously. But we are not on the negotiating table as has been stipulated by the 2006 resolution of the Parliament. So I think that's on the issue of reparations. We see it completely differently. But once, if we are part of the negotiating team, then we will address it at that point in time. John also asked, and that was actually seconded by Rosa, regarding the exclusion of the San people, the Damara people, and also the Coloureds, for that matter, the Coloureds and the Bastard people that were part of it. Here again, what Wolfgang explained is part of the contributing factors. The lack of history or knowledge about the San and the Damara side. When the Nama and Obairo people pushed this thing from the beginning, we had a lot of debates, consultations with our lawyers in America as well. And one of the issues is, if you want to go the route of genocide, you have to look at how is the compliance. Is it direct or is it indirect that you have been affected? And our lawyer, Ken, was one of the people who actually negotiated with Germany in terms of the people that were indirectly affected. So you have got the extermination orders. So if you go the legal route, the legal basis, you have to first look at the other party, like the German government, must acknowledge through the legal process, yes, this is what happened. And then you bring, okay, you are targeting these people, but at the end of the day, the 30% of the Damara people were also killed. That is the approach we had. We had to focus first on the legal part for Germany to accept that it has happened, and then, although you're targeting these people, you have also had you have also killed the following people. That was the second contributing factor on that matter. So initially it's the legal and also the lack of the knowledge and the history. That is basically what is affecting there. I hope those were the key.
To answer this question with all the other questions, because if you look at the questions, they are all speaking more the same thing. And when you look through the word that my brother spoke about, the word reparations, which is a word from the law, kind of, it's a criminal word. It has 5 components in it. One of the components that we talk about compensation, satisfactory, talk about apology, non-repetitions. But one of the key components that I want to touch base on today is this institution, the way you can institute the people who are dispossessed. And this one has nothing to do with mostly the government of Germany, but the descendants that were benefited from this process, that get the land from this, the owner of this land. But we don't have to deny. If you read that book, I went to that book maybe several times, that the descendants of the German or people who benefited from this process, they developed some emotions around the land. The land to them is no more about economical, but it becomes also their self-identity, because they identify themselves with that land, because some of them have been staying in the land for 100 years. And they develop the same emotion that we have attachment to the land as the Hereros and the Namas, because they become there. Some of them have their ancestors in the same land or the same farm. So we cannot also deny that. And that's what caused that, so that we can come together and sit and have a dialogue with the same issues, so we can sit and talk. And that if the German government accepts that they did what they did, they want to come the legal way to do the reparations, then they have to do we have to get the ancestral land back to the people. But there are these people that have been staying here for 100 years in this land. How can we go about it? This is where we have to have a dialogue between the 3 generations or 3 descendants. Then we can come up with solutions and recommendations. How can we go about it without affecting anybody, because we don't want to go to another war. Yeah, so the best to address this gap between the 2 people is when we have conversations between the 2 groups. But the problem that we have right now is that we don't have that conversation going between the 2 groups. The either our fellow descendants from the Germany more lean to what the government is doing. We are not negotiating reconciliations or joint declarations. We are not up to that. We are not talking about reparations. So, but they are more lean or have a conversation or speaking with other technical teams from the government side. They are not approaching the victim like the Nama and the Herero transitional authority that are operating as they have 90% of the affected community that are following them. So to bring this solution is when we sit together as the Namibians, we try to look at each other, so we try to find amicable solutions. If you look at the whole issue of land, we talk about the conference of land. The land reform whole policy program really doesn't speak about the ancestral land. If you look at the whole resettlement programs also that we have, it's no more about we settle the connected, the political connected, not those who lose the land, but those who have political connections are the ones who are resettling these farmers. So that's one of the challenges. So the government is not solving, but it's adding water or oil to the fire. It's not bringing solutions to these issues because what their consultation is also maybe not even being approach the same people. And that's where the fear that my sister was talking about. The fear is caused by the government. We cannot talk about this. It's sensitive, it's what? Because they are hiding to address the thing head on. They don't want to come to the table and discuss or bring us together. Or maybe I'll end it.
Thank you, Alphonse. Obviously, we had expectations on the second line conference. Alphonse says he doesn't seem to be happy with the government's current land redistribution measures. But Erica, in your book, you feel that when it comes to land redistribution, Namibia is doing so much better than, for example, South Africa. You have a different view on this, that, at least something has been done, while the others feel like more should be done. Well, how do you respond to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is not quite right that I say the land reform program in Namibia is a success. No, I don't say that at all. But I mentioned in the book, you're right, that by today about 30% of the formerly white-owned land has been returned to black Namibian farmers. 30% of the commercial agricultural land. So that is not much, seeing that the whites are only about 6% of the population, but it's more than, for example, in South Africa. At the same time, one can also just add in between, in South Africa, in 1995, after apartheid was abolished, they had a land restitution program. In South Africa, there was the Land Tenure Act of 1913, when hundreds of families, actually thousands of families, were dispossessed of land, and that land was given to white farmers. Now these dispossessions were meticulously documented by the colonial South African government, so it was relatively easy, in contrast to Namibia, where we don't have a certain point in history and not so well documented. There are documents, but not so well documented resources to and black South Africans who were dispossessed or whose ancestors or families were dispossessed at that time could reclaim or could apply for compensation, either to get that land back, or if that wasn't possible, to get an alternative piece of land, or to get financial compensation. And the interesting thing is that in South Africa, about 60,000 people used this opportunity to reclaim or to claim compensation or land, that I think 70% of them opted for financial compensation. They didn't really want their land back or an alternative piece of land. It just shows how it influences the statistics. So South Africa made this effort, but but it didn't result in more land being returned to black South Africans. And the second land, about ancestral land, the second land conference was mainly about ancestral land. It was, and urban land. It was the main topic actually. And as I also read it in my book, but as many of you know, after the second land conference, the president appointed a commission of inquiry into ancestral land claims, land rights and restitution. In this commission, consisting of 16 Namibians from including Herero and Nama people like Fano Kapana and Uhuru Deltas and so on, they sat for 1 year and consulted all kinds of people and literature and legal documents and so on, but they altogether received more than 1,700 written and oral testimonies of people, ordinary people, also community leaders, also some representatives, but also individuals who explained why and in which way and based on which evidence or documents they lay a claim to ancestral land. More than 1,750 or so people. And these are all of them are documented in writing in the report of the Commission of Inquiry. And I read many of them and they are very interesting and very valid also. And the report was released, I think, in July this year, very, very late. And nothing has happened since then. The government didn't react to it. There were no, and I think it wasn't even brought before Parliament or anything, so nothing happened. It's lying there. And all these ancestral claims are there, but it also shows when you read the summary of the commission, how difficult it is to pinpoint what is whose ancestral land. There are so many in the report. People understand very different things about ancestral land. The pre-colonial ancestral land cannot be retraced, they say in the report, exactly. Although Gerda gave us just now an explanation how well you knew about ancestral land claims, so that's interesting. In any case, the government made an effort to address the topic of ancestral land through the second land conference. But the question is, was it just an exercise, a PR exercise, or was it a genuine effort to really address the ancestral land question? The Commission was also requested to propose legislation which would make the ancestral land claims possible. And I think they also did this, is included a bit vague in that report. So yes, ancestral land have been addressed. And with lots of effort and money and time, the question is, how genuine is this effort that was made by the present Namibian government?
Yeah, I just want to add to one thing. When we talk about white owning land, when it comes to the majority, we normally, especially the one who have been through the genocide, they think white is German only. But if you look at the current statistics when it comes to land, we have the Africans, we have more land than the Germans, if you go to statistics. But these guys are not being called out so that they can come on a discussion table about these issues. But we just throw stones only to the Germans descendants, but not the Africans descendants. That's one of the key things that when you have to solve the issue of the land, both groups should come on the table, on the discussion table. The Africans that have been hiding too much behind the Germans. They should come forward and also be questions in these issues. Because there was a disposition between from the German farmers went to the African farmers. That's one. Two, when we come to the land issues, on the deposition of farming and all this, the most affected people in this thing is the farm workers. And these people are not being brought on the discussion table. These are the people who have been affected, and as you can see, these are the people who have also been affected on a daily basis through willing buyer, willing sellers process. These farm workers are people who are losing land at every day basis, but the government, the blind eye on it, didn't even discuss about it. In one discussion, I think is one of the key that they should be brought on the discussion table so that we can sit with them and hear their issues.
Thank you, Alfred. Wow. Is this ancestral land issue going to be resolved? Is there hope? Is it ever going to be resolved? I mean, and what's the whole deal with the Ancestral Land Claims Commission? Do you think they were effective? What kind of a land redistribution program would you like to see that you feel will be successful at addressing the affected communities?
Yeah, thanks. I think John was reading there from the settlement commission or the settlement commission. John, I might be wrong, but I think the person who was heading then was Dr. Paul Rothbard. I might be mistaken, but I think it was Dr. Paul Rothbard. Maybe our historian can help us on that. The settlement commissioner from 1903 to 1906 was Dr. Paul Rothbard in German Southwest Africa, for instance, here. And when you look at the communal land, what we have today is basically the same native reserve that you are continuing with. So everything that John was explaining there, that you will actually work only for someone, you will not be making a living on your own as long as you're living in a communal land. Those are the things that will be addressed with land, meaning you must abolish communal land. You must abolish a house that you build with bricks on communal land should not become valueless or with less value just because you build it on a communal land. The house is providing you with the same shelter that a house in town will provide you with. Equally, when we look at the land issue going forward, not everyone is a farmer. Not everyone needs a farm of 6,000 or 5,000 hectares. But for instance, if I look around my brothers and sisters, we have about 8 brothers sitting. They are qualified, they work, but they cannot buy houses in Kitmans while they are from Kitmans. Access to land. If you are a teacher or you are not a farmer, you should have that access. And this is some of the issues around land that we raised also with the German parliamentarian Otmar when he was last in Germany and when I was in Germany. So we obviously, as Nama Traditional Leaders Association, did not take part in the Second Land Conference. We did not also take part in the Ancestral Land Commission of Inquiry. We knew that nothing will come out of it, and we still know you need a government that's willing to address these issues. We are not yet there. We, for the first time now, experience good debates in Parliament that we never had before. So once our maturity level is perhaps not yet there, but once we move in that direction, then we will be able to address these issues. Whether you are living in a township or whether you are living in an urban or rural, we need to move away from those issues. Coming back to ancestral land, the fear of ancestral land issues is that many people think, we have now heard an example from Erica, where she was saying in South Africa how many people opted to be compensated rather than go and farm while they have no farming experience. We in Namibia are simply not able as yet to address the issue as adults. We are hiding behind sensitivity and fear and all those, but we are not really addressing it. Once if we have a government or the level of maturity increases or we are able to address this, then I think we'll get to it where we'll be able to address the ancestral land the right way and also have participation in the right way. Because currently people are saying, if nothing comes out of it, why should I participate? Yes. Thank you.
You know what I mean? Tony Nyoma, when he was Minister of Urban and Rural Land and all that, he said something about, well, why should we give land to the poor people? What are we asking for? Why do we want land exactly? To do what with it?
Thank you very much. What Oslo law, the law of humanity, where land is the shelter, is where we have to belong. So people need land because they need to belong to somewhere where they call home. So you cannot live in a flat and call it home. So people need land, either being a farm or just a place where they can call home. So people need their belonging because land defines who we are. As I said, to some it can be economical channel where they can use generate from the land. Some is also have spiritual connections to it and the emotion around it. But land, we cannot go away from land. That's the root cause of our identity.
Yeah, thank you. Why do people want land? That was one of my questions in this book, asking people why you want land. Those who don't have land and those who got some piece of land through the resettlement program. And the interesting thing is that many people, I don't know how many in terms of percentage, but most people want a piece of land, not those who didn't have land before, not because they want to be farmers and to become economically prosperous through farming, but exactly what you said, because they want a home where nobody can chase them away from, which is theirs, where their family can gather, where they can have where they can have which sort of place where they can go when they are old, and several people also said, no, if I could get a plot near Windhoek or near Gobares or near Omaruru, I would be much happier actually. I applied for a resettlement farm because I want a home. Okay, now I get a farm and I have to do some farming. My children must help me because, you know, I can't do it on my own. But okay, then I take a farm. And people today tell me, I'm also economist and agriculturalist, if the government with the resettlement farm would have established more closely the reasons why people want a piece of land, we could have resettled so many more people on urban land. We could have thousands and thousands more people on a not a small but a reasonable plot of land near the towns and villages, and they would be very happy. And give those people who really want to farm a farm, and maybe even a bigger farm, not a 1,000 or 2,000, 3,000 hectare farm, so that they can be productive. If I may, I want to shortly say something about your questions about the German-speaking Namibians. I am a Namibian. My mother tongue is German, so I belong to that group. I was born here. My mother, grandmother were born here. My father came here in 1935. My children live here. My grandchildren live here. Namibia is my home. I love Namibia. I have no other home. It's my only home. And it's the only home of my family. The German-speaking Namibians, yes, they had a problem with the genocide. They had to go through a process to learn about it more than what their ancestors told them, to be informed about it, and also to develop empathy. And I think at no other time have the German-speaking Namibians talked so much about the genocide, discussed it, and looking for solutions, or just informing themselves about it. And not long ago, actually this year, with some, not because of the genocide, but it almost coincided, a group of German-speaking Namibians have formed the Forum of German-speaking Namibians. This is a forum, and the chairperson is here. You can also, but one objective is to enter into dialogue, and they have done that. They have talked already 2 years ago. They have started to talk with Herero people and Nama people from the different groupings, from those who support the reconciliation agreement, from those who are against it. They have initiated these talks. Sometimes the Herero and Nama came to them and asked them to get into dialogue. So there is something happening. It's a beginning, and it's not all German-speaking Namibians who have joined that group, but it is a beginning. And as I said, the interest at the moment has never been that great, and the openness, I would also say, is much greater now today than previously. Not by all. Of course, there are other people. And to your questions, Mr. Nakuta, about why are the Germans in Germany so much more behind the genocide discussions in the Nama and Herero people than the German Namibians. First of all, those who are vocal are journalists, politicians, members of NGOs who work in Germany, and they also make their living by writing about the genocide, and genocide is an interesting topic, and they have to attract a readership in their country. But that is not the main point. The main point is that they don't live here. They live in Germany. Nothing what happens with the genocide negotiations affects them at all, except that it still gives them fodder to write about. And while the German-speaking Namibians living here, they are affected directly by everything that's happening here. And I don't want to emphasize it, but German-speaking Namibians have been threatened, they have been insulted during the last months and years. And some of them are really frightened, especially farmers, when they get threats, we will get you, and we will come in the night, and you will wake up one night and you won't know the people will stand in front of your bed, and things like that. Of course, that frightens you. And what do I want to say? That is maybe one reason. It's not an excuse, but an explanation why people are more reluctant or more questioning. What does it mean? What will happen? What does it mean for us? It's not that the German people think it's completely supported and the German-speaking here don't. It's a completely different standpoint from which they can talk about these things. Just a short explanation.
Same question definitely for you. What do people want the land for? To do what with?
Yeah, that's, you see, like Eric was saying, there needs to be a sense of belonging. You need to look at you need a home, and there must be a sense of belonging on the one side. But on the other side, it's also to do with economic reasons. There will be economic reasons in that. As I was saying, if people can get homes, that's one part of it. And you have something that you can claim as yours, that you can belong, that belongs to you and you belong to. But if in the communal area, if you drive throughout the communal area, you will find brick houses standing without roofs, without windows, because every time a person moves, he's taking whatever he can take with, because there is no sense of ownership or belonging, or it's just wasted money. It makes people poorer every time they want to buy a decent or burger. Believe this communal or native reserve needs to be abolished. We need to move away from that. But what's also important is when land was taken away, there are people that are living today in Botswana, South Africa, and elsewhere in diaspora. One of my great-grandfathers left for South Africa when the farm of the land was taken and all the animals were taken. Two of them moved to Lutherans. One decided to stay with their parents, but the other one left for South Africa. We've never ever seen him, or anybody never ever saw him. They are now living in diaspora. Obviously, he must have generations now living there. But the land is your dignity. You must be able to stand up at night when nature calls you and you have to go to the toilet or to the bathroom. But look at the informal settlements. The moment you stand up and leave, when the nature calls, you stand a chance to be raped or to be killed. What dignity is in that? Similarly, your great-parents or grandparents had a living, a dignified life. We are currently unable to do that at all because of land. Then you have the issue of the skewed or corrupt land distribution, where you try to change the English language just to fit your purpose. Resettlement is a term that exists in the language of English. But you can't make a law and change the meaning of the word resettlement so that it fits your program of putting people on land that were never ever on that land. And then you say, for our case, in our Namibian laws, the term resettlement has a completely different meaning. Because you are using this opportunity, instead of resettling the people that lost the land, you take now the land for yourself and you say the definition of resettlement has got a new meaning in Namibia. That is absolutely wrong. Yes. Thank you.
So much. Yes. Got a hand up. We're running out of time, so let's try to focus on the way forward. What kind of land redistribution measures we would like to see to make everybody happy?
I don't think I can directly answer to this question. First of all, my name is Herero and Nama. I'm a Namibian of German descent, and I want to commend, first of all, the possibility thinkers who have initiated this encounter. I welcome that very much, and it is not the first encounter, but it is a very significant one, and a road that we should follow, because we have heard from different aspects many substantial issues tonight. And we learn and we must recognize the stance and the perspective of our different communities, whatever language we speak. One thing is very certain, that all of us have grown up in different environments that you cannot interchange. That is part of our history. And as we go along, as we encounter each other, we have to shed, we learn more, and we have to shed some of ingrained prejudices that we may have in our small communities, so that we can shape the future of this very beautiful country. And but we cannot forget where we come from. So we may have different issues, how we honor the dead. Do we, as German-speaking Namibians, demonize the Hereros who stood up against colonization and suppression? Do we demonize, or should we demonize, the German soldiers who were here? These are issues that we can address in a sober context. But once again, and I want to finish off here, I want to commend the possibility thinkers that you have taken this initiative, and let us continue along, because we have a future that to shape, and there is enough space for all of us in this country.
Forum of German-speaking Namibians that Erika introduced already. Just to confirm what Erika said, we are here about dialogue. We sense the civil responsibility that we've got in also getting involved in Namibian political and social affairs. We've been absent for too long, we acknowledge it, and that has been acknowledged way before the joint declaration was on the table. So we are not an answer to the joint declaration, but obviously it's one of the key concepts that we will embrace on. The forum has been basically established 2 years ago, but the official inauguration due to COVID-19 was only in April, and as we know, on 15 May, the joint declaration was signed. Yes, just to add on to Erika, thank you very much. You introduced the forum very nicely, but we as Germans do not have the support of all German-speaking Namibians, as Erika also alluded, but it is our big responsibility to sensitize the German community about this topic of genocide. We use every opportunity. There was a book launch 2 weeks ago by the Namibia Scientific Society. You will not have heard about it. It was exclusively held in German. We raised our concerns about that event. So we will use every opportunity to speak to our fellow German-speaking Namibians and sensitize them. We've spoken to Deodat Dirkse. We also want to continue speaking to you. Dialogue is of critical importance. We want to also speak to Alphonse and the possibility thinkers. And then at this note, also thank you very much for this platform. Let's carry on the road of dialogue in the interest of one Namibia, one nation. Thank you very much.
Reconciliation agreement, sorry for my hand. The reconciliation agreement is divisive. If it were to be passed by Parliament, I think we will have much more problems. My question to the forum: are you prepared, as soon as this thing, or even before, to say and to advise the parliamentarians not to adopt this reconciliation? Or is it too much to ask? Because if it were to come from the German-speaking Namibian, because this thing is divisive, it's not inclusive, it is not talking about the language of reparations, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go into it. Is the forum prepared to say to the Namibian parliamentarians, do not adopt this, let this thing go back to the drawing board, and let the process be much more inclusive, and so forth.
Okay. Think about it for a while. Let me just quickly go to Rosa here. Keep it brief, please.
Just for me, I think the way ahead or the way forward. Thanks so much for the forum. Now there might be a possibility that more dialogue will even start with the generational farm workers. I think the government has failed us to address the ancestral question and to look into that. So there are several practical things that I, as a Namibian, want us all to really do. People have put out their wishes and how they like the things to be helped with in terms of the loss of land. One thing that this forum and all of us can do is to really acknowledge the generational farm workers and their great deeds, and therefore acknowledge the sacred spaces on the land of their ancestors, the graveyards, for example, to allow them to enter with given guidelines or rules, for example, so that they can bury and actually provide the needed respect to those people, because government will not do that. Also, I think acknowledge the land, somebody said is so big, the land that you are also having this big expropriation story is too long. Maybe you need to find a way how you can share the land, how you in your own terms with other Namibians can share your land, your many farms, maybe the willing seller, willing buyer story is maybe no longer even available. Our people are saying the land gives us food. We belong to the land. And that's what they are saying. The land is giving them food. So there is no way that we will ever let them away. So maybe find ways in terms of reconciling, not the one in the debate in Parliament, but in the ways how we in real can reconcile. We can call it One Namibia, One Nation. I don't think that is the one that is working. I think the one that will work is a practical one, a new one that we, all of us, can take note. So please, share the land.
Thank you, Rosa. Can I?
This is what it's all about. I think the emphasis of the forum is definitely also to look at the reconciliation aspect, to look into the future. Just to share what Erika said is, if this generation still argues about the genocide, whether it was one or not, I think the German-speaking forum has got a clear viewpoint. We do recognize the fact that it was a genocide. Let's leave the debate maybe to the next generations. Okay? To John, very difficult question. First of all, I'd also extend my hand to you, my invitation to come and sit with us around the table. Now, on the joint declaration, it is a very, very emotional topic. If you talk about quantum, financial compensation, as it has been deliberately worded in the joint declaration. Now, my comments are the following too. I'm an accountant by profession. First of all, I do not think that the 30 years, the length of the period with the financial compensation will be paid is fair, with all due respect. I think we need to close this chapter. If we do decide on that route, if there is joint consent by both bilateral governments, we need to close the chapter in the sense of financial compensation quicker, so that we see the rewards of the compensation quicker. I think there has also been a willingness from Mr. Ruprecht Polenz, from the German government, the German negotiating team, that the portion, the time span of 30 years will be reduced considerably. And then just, without commenting necessarily on the joint declaration, just again from an accounting perspective, we're looking at 1.1 million euros. 1.1 billion euros, which is 1,100 million euros, which is 18,000 billion NAM dollars. And I think if I'm correctly informed in the joint declaration, 1/3 of that is to be allocated for the acquisition of farmland. So if you allocate 6,000 million NAM dollars to, say, on an assumption, an average farm worth of 10 million, you arrive at 600 farms that could be redistributed. Getting back to Erika's argument, currently the domination of the German-speaking Namibian population of farming has diminished already since independence, so that would be another measure that would bring that dominance down even further to probably 50% only. And then, on the evolutionary reality, German-speaking Namibians are becoming less and less in this country. So, I'm not saying we've got another 200 or 300 years to solve this problem, but in 50 years' time, the demographics on the farmland will have changed significantly. Let's do it in a peaceful way, in the sense of to keep the social peace. Sorry, Mrs. Nami says, why Namibia, why nations? There's no alternative to that.
Thank you all.
And he has got a very fair understanding of what this joint declaration will do if it proceeds. I hear the chairman of the German-speaking Namibians that it can be taken piecemeal, or he did his calculations. Mine are completely different. I think it's a joke. The joint declaration will cause more and more harm if it succeeds in Parliament, because we will be forced to take action, and that action might be violent. So we are currently going the peaceful routes. We are basically talking to the Parliament. The Nama Traditional Leaders Association has submitted that petition to the Parliament. It has been read in the Parliament and it has been pushed through to a subcommittee. And our key issue there is that the 2006 resolution is stating clearly that we should participate and we should be participants in the negotiations. And we are not there for development aid. We are there for our reparations package. That should be full. But just important, we are also focused on the principle of restitution before compensation. That must be very clear. The joint declaration that is currently standing is simply causing too much harm for us. It does not include very critical parts, what the affected community wants. Therefore, we should all together not accept, obviously if it goes to Parliament, we'll go to court. We'll go the soft routes. With the special rapporteur's report currently that came out in July, the Nama and Herero people have already petitioned the UN and it came out. So we'll go the UN route, we'll go the route of Parliament, the courts. But eventually, if nothing is happening and nothing is taken seriously, we must accept that we will take action. There's no doubt about it. As far as the Nama people are concerned, only in the 1400s, we had the Portuguese, in the 1600s, we had the Dutch, and followed by the British, and in the 1800s, the Germans. So for us to move forward, we must reject the joint declaration. That is our position. Thank you.
Oh, I thought we were, okay.
You will resort to violence. May I ask against whom you would resort to violence? Because Maybe you can answer that question first.
No, we will take action. That action may not be violent when it starts. Let's say all the Nama leaders, all the Herero leaders, the Damara leaders, San leaders will say we will not support the resettlement program anymore. We will not support communal land commissions and communal land boards anymore. We'll start taking action up until the point where we would want the government to acknowledge that these issues must be addressed.
Okay.
That's the action I'm referring to.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. That's very good. The other question I have in that regards, if we support, if the forum supports this, your stance, it will not have very much influence on the German position, on Germany's position, because we are not German citizens. So I have a feeling that even if we support or not, or if the government agrees or not, you will take action against the wrong person, against the wrong people. Because if Germany doesn't agree to your demands, you will take action within Namibia, not affecting any German politician or any German inhabitant. So that's why I'm a bit concerned about that.
Sleep here. We continue taking more questions and comments and stuff. We need to organize another follow-up event. Can we
just clarify?
very briefly, please?
Thanks very much. The actions and the declaration from our lawyers that are sitting in Germany, in England, in America, and who are also part of our partners in this fight. It is very clear that the political setup and legal setup in Germany is different from that of Namibia. In Germany, the government of Germany is empowered to negotiate and to sign the agreement. But in the case of Namibia, it must go through Parliament. Parliament must endorse the agreement, and then that agreement comes in. So, but if the Namibian Parliament rejects the agreement or the joint declaration, there is no way to continue with the agreement. So there will be effect, you will be indirectly or directly stopping the process. Therefore, it's not a question of you are taking action against the wrong people. You are taking action at the right place if the Namibian Parliament does not accept the joint declaration. That's what we are referring to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. Erika, any last remarks before we close our program for today?
Well, I must honestly say, I don't have a solution. I'm deeply concerned and I'm deeply also emotionally moved by what is happening in our country today. But I don't know what the solution can be, because the two sides, the one who accept the resolution, reconciliation agreement or declaration, and then the Namibian government and their supporters, also amongst some of them are also from the Herero and Nama side, and wanting to pass that resolution. I see that there is no openness for any compromise. There's only this or nothing. From the other side, there's only this or nothing. And if in a country different groups who have different interests and different histories and different emotions are not prepared to find a compromise, I myself cannot see where this will lead. And I don't have a wonderful closing remark.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to comment on the last point of the joint declarations. my personal view is that it should be rejected. It had to be rejected because it doesn't lead to the good cause in the first place. And I want to highlight the support that we need maybe from the forum of the German communities that if we stand together with the majority of the community said no to this, when the action will be taken as is said, the Hereros and the Namas, they will be lenient to some of the stuff because we are now feeling that we are more Namibian, we are also supporting in our cause to fight reparation or to fight our justice. But if you're on the other side with the government, we feel like you are supporting what the government is doing. And that would lead to these people to cause violence and the threat that Eric spoke about, that people say they are coming to our farm and all those things. These come because we are not vocal about these issues. That's why people are even threatening in social media that we are coming to get our farms and all this stuff. But if you become vocal and say, we don't, we are rejecting what the government is saying, I think they will not have the same comment come. Yeah, but my last recommendation is that we have to have more dialogue with all the affected communities, and we have to bring all on the discussion tables, the farm workers, the Africans, even the government, so that we can have these issues.
Thank you so much, everybody.